Does the book change the way we think about the impact of microfinance? I think there are a couple of ways that it makes a difference. One of them is that it points out the range of uses that poor people put loan proceeds to, well, both loans and savings. The classic story about microfinance has always been that people take out loans, invest them in their microenterprises, increase their incomes, and escape poverty that way. The real picture is much more complex. As the book points out, there's a tremendous amount of just plain consumption smoothing. That is to say, using the loan proceeds the same way you and I use loan proceeds, and that the actual business use of financial services is a minority of the usage, and in that it's consistent with a lot of other studies. And this should temper our expectations about how much microfinance is going to increase incomes. The other way that it affects the impact picture is the old story was that Microcredit was making loans available to people who had no loans available otherwise. And as the financial diaries make clear, the typical poor household has a fairly wide range of financial products and services available, different forms of loans, including interest-free loans from family members to the village moneylender to supplier credit, and also various ways to save. And if you see that microcredit and microsavings, formal microsavings and microcredit, if you see that they take their place within a fairly broad array of financial services, then you're a little bit less likely to expect that by themselves they're going to totally change the lives of the users. What do I think the most important findings in the book are? Well, I would start with the central observation that the book makes, which is that being poor is not just about having too low an income. It's also about having an income usually that is irregular and unreliable. And it's because of that irregularity that poor people actually need and use financial services like loans and savings more than people who are better off. That's quite a striking finding. A lot of previous studies would go in and take a one-time snapshot of a poor household, and they might find that there were very small balances outstanding in their debt relationship or savings relationship. On the basis of that kind of a picture, you would assume that financial services played a fairly minor role in the household economy. But the financial diary methodology, where the researchers are in talking with the households every 2 weeks and are in a position not just to observe the one-time snapshot, but also the flows in and out of those savings and credit products, gives a completely different picture. When you compare the flows in and out of debt and savings instruments to annual income, it ranges from 75% of annual income up to even 500% of annual income in some cases. So the picture that it gives us is one of very active use of loans and savings. And again, the reason for this is that poor people living on less than $2 a day, very seldom are salaried people who can count on a regular income. And if the income is coming in sporadically, you have to find ways to continue to eat every day and satisfy other basic needs, and that means saving and borrowing. I'd say a second important set of findings is about the actual uses to which poor people are putting their savings proceeds and their loan proceeds. One set of uses can be characterized simply as consumption smoothing. The story that comes to mind on this count is a woman I was talking to years ago in India who had been in a microcredit program for several years. And I asked her whether she thought her family had more to eat over the course of a year than they had before she got in the program. And she was kind of a thoughtful lady. She considered it a little bit and then said, no, she didn't think so. And I asked her what good the microcredit was. And she looked at me as if I had a hole in my head and said, we eat every day now. So consumption smoothing is one very important use that the money goes to. A second class of uses has to do with dealing with shocks and emergencies. There are all sorts of crises that poor households are vulnerable to, and many of them require immediate amounts of cash to deal with them. And again, both savings and credit are a way to cope with that. And the third set of uses, people use savings and credit to amass lump sums of money that they need. My income may come in dribs and drabs, little amounts every day, and I need to convert that kind of income into the availability of a usefully large amount of money, for instance, to pay school fees or to pay for my daughter's wedding or to meet funeral expenses, or also to invest in a business asset. When you look at the uses of the proceeds from loans and also savings withdrawals, it turns out that only about 30% of them are used for business investment. The rest is used for a range of other purposes. I would say that the last big set of findings in the book is about where microfinance fits in the spectrum of products, financial products that are available to poor people. As the book points out, there are quite a few alternatives that are available. Most of the informal, that is the non-institutional kinds of savings and credit that are available, tend to be unreliable. The person that you want the money from may not have it or may not be willing to give it to you. The big advantage of formal institutional microcredit is that it is reliable. By and large, the loan officers show up when they're supposed to show up. You know if you fulfill the conditions of your previous loan, you can get another loan. And given the fact that financial services, a big part of their role is to cope with unreliability in the lives of poor households, having financial services that themselves are reliable is a very important factor. There's a downside to formal microcredit and microsavings, and that is that the products tend to be inflexible, especially the credit. The standard microloan in South Asia for years was a year loan with a payment every week, which corresponds to nobody's household cash flow. To some extent, this inflexibility is necessary to reduce the cost of delivering the loans. But increasingly, microfinance institutions are trying to loosen up their products and allow more accommodation to the individual needs of clients. And increasing numbers of them are finding that they can deliver these loans without the administrative costs running out of bounds. And those are the ones that I would highlight as the biggest findings of the book.